Don't confuse storage with inheritance, Delaney. My mother said it in her church voice. Soft, patient, the voice she used when she wanted witnesses to think she was being reasonable with a difficult daughter. We were standing in her dead sister's living room. Gull Point Road, Marbury, Maine, 6 weeks after we buried Aunt Lorraine, and the woman's reading glasses were still folded on the arm of the green chair where she'd left them. My mother had a realtor's folder tucked under her elbow like a hymnal. 11 people in that room. My father, Gordon, by the window, examining the ceiling like it owed him money. My brother Tyler on the couch with his shoes on the cushions, 34 years old and still sitting like a teenager who'd been promised something. His wife, Brooke, beside him with her phone face down on her knee. 2 cousins. A neighbor named Ruthie who had come with a casserole and stayed for the show. And the realtor, a man in a quarter zip who kept checking his watch because he had a 2 o'clock in Camden. The house goes on the market Monday, my mother said. The proceeds go to Tyler. He's got the family, he's got the mortgage, he's got the real expenses. Ruthie made a small sound. Nobody else moved. Now, Delaney. My mother turned to me and did the thing she always did before a knife went in. She smiled. I know you spent time here. Every summer we sent you to Lorraine's. You know why? Because you were the one we could leave behind. Tyler needed us. You needed somewhere to be kept. Somebody's chair creaked. You were stored here, sweetheart. That's all. It was a kindness. So don't stand in my sister's living room acting like a beneficiary. The realtor slid a listing agreement across the coffee table, right over the ring stain where Lorraine used to set her tea. He put a pen on top of it and pushed both toward me because he'd been told by somebody in that room that my signature was a formality. I looked at the paper for a long moment. Then I looked at my mother, and I asked her one question, in a voice so flat it barely made it across the room. Priscilla, I said, who told you this house was yours to sell? She laughed, actually laughed. Excuse me. It's a simple question, who told you? My father finally turned from the window. Tyler took his feet off the couch. And Brooke, who is not stupid, picked her phone back up and held it in both hands like she was suddenly very interested in having a record of the next 60 seconds. I want you to freeze this room with me. My mother with the folder, the realtor with his pen, 11 people breathing in a house that smelled like cedar and old lemon polish. My hand nowhere near that agreement. Because there were 3 things nobody in that living room knew. They didn't know what Lorraine had signed in the spring of 2019, or who witnessed it. They didn't know about the green metal box in the upstairs closet, and what my aunt had been quietly collecting inside it for 26 years. And they absolutely did not know that my brother Tyler was $412,000 underwater, and that in 9 days, he would need something from me that no amount of shouting could take. But to understand how we got here, and what I did in that room that left every single one of them speechless, I need to take you back 26 years. To the first summer they packed my bag before they packed their own. Before I do that, tell me something in the comments. Where are you listening from right now? Which country, and what time is it where you are? I like knowing who's in the room with me for this part. My name is Delaney Fitch, and for the first 11 years of my life, I genuinely believed that summer was a punishment I had earned. The pattern started in June 1999. I was 7. My mother, Priscilla, came into my room with a duffel bag already half-packed, which meant the decision had been made days earlier in a conversation I wasn't part of. She told me I was going to stay with Aunt Lorraine in Marbury for 6 weeks. She said it the way you'd announce a dentist appointment. What about the trip? I asked. There was a brochure on the kitchen counter, Lake George, a cabin with a dock. Tyler gets carsick if the drive's too crowded, she said. Tyler was 9, he did not get carsick, he got everything else. That first drive north took 2 hours and 40 minutes, and my father, Gordon, played talk radio the entire way and did not speak to me once. He dropped me at the end of a gravel driveway on Gull Point Road, handed Lorraine a grocery bag with my clothes in it, because the duffel had apparently been needed for the vacation, and was back in the car before I reached the porch. Lorraine Fitch was my father's older sister. 51 that summer. She had never married, she had never had children, and the family talked about her the way people talk about a chair with a broken leg: useful in the right corner, embarrassing in company. She wore men's flannel in October. She smelled like turpentine and coffee. Her house was a two-story shingled thing on 4 acres with a bad roof and a view of the water that nobody in my family ever once mentioned. That house is the first detail I need you to hold on to. In 1999, Gull Point Road was nothing. Fishermen, 3 year-round families, a bait shack. My parents thought Lorraine had been left the place by their mother as a consolation prize, and they were right, and they never looked at it again. My mother once described it, at a Thanksgiving table, as the shack Gordon's sister rots in. Here's what nobody bothered to learn. Lorraine's 4 acres included 210 feet of undeveloped waterfront. In 1999, that was worth maybe $60,000, and the taxes on it were $900 a year, and my aunt paid them herself for 4 decades out of a job restoring furniture in a barn behind the house. The second summer, I stopped crying in the car. By the 4th, I was counting days until June. Lorraine did not treat me like luggage. That's the whole thing, really. She woke me up at 5:30 to strip varnish. She made me sand a table for 11 hours and then made me do it again because I'd gone across the grain. She taught me to read a grain pattern, to mix hide glue, to tell walnut from stained birch by weight. She talked to me like I was a person with a functioning brain, which in 1999 was a novelty so profound that I have never fully recovered from it. One night late, when I was maybe 12, I asked her why my parents sent me away. She was at the sink, she didn't turn around. "Because they can," she said, "and because they think nobody's writing it down." I thought it was just something to say. It wasn't. Hold on to that line too. Now, the family arithmetic, so you understand the shape of the thing. Tyler was the investment. My parents put him through Bowdoin, and when he flunked out at 19, they put him through a second school, and when that ended, they bought him a truck and a landscaping business and called him an entrepreneur. Total spend on Tyler, and I know this number precisely because I found it later in a ledger my mother kept in the same handwriting she used for grocery lists. $238,000 between 2008 and 2021. Total spend on me after age 18, 0. When I got into the furniture conservation program at a school in Boston, my mother told me she thought trade work was a nice hobby for someone who doesn't need to impress anyone. I paid for it with student loans, 3 jobs, and $11,000 that Lorraine wired me in 2013 and made me swear never to mention at a family gathering. I didn't, but I kept the wire receipt. Here is the third detail, and it's the one that would eventually cost my mother the house. The upstairs hall closet at Gull Point had a green metal document box on the top shelf. Fireproof, dented on one corner, the kind you buy at a hardware store for $30. I saw Lorraine put things in it maybe 5 times over 26 years, and she never once let me see what. The last time was August 2019. I was 31, up for a weekend, and I came around the corner and caught her sliding an envelope in and turning the little key. She looked at me, completely unbothered. "You'll get this eventually," she said. "Don't open it before you have to." Before I have to for what? You'll know. That was also the spring, 5 months earlier, that Lorraine drove herself into Rockland and sat in an office on Union Street for 2 hours with a lawyer named Simon Ackafer and 2 witnesses she chose specifically because they were not related to anyone in my family. I didn't know about that meeting until much later. Neither did my parents. That's the point. And the fourth detail. In 2022, at my cousin's wedding, I walked past the coat room and heard my mother's voice on the other side of the door, talking to my father, thinking she was alone. "She's fine up there, she's Lorraine's problem now." Then she said something else, 8 words, and I want to save those for later, because when I finally said them back to her, in that living room with 11 people watching, my father had to sit down. Because by then Lorraine was dying, and she had known for 18 months, and she had not told a single person in the family except one. The escalations didn't come as explosions. They came as paperwork and small rooms. August 2011. I was 19, home for 4 days, and I'd just been accepted into the conservation program in Boston. Full acceptance letter, embossed, the whole thing. My mother made a roast. I actually thought the roast was for me. Halfway through, my father tapped his glass and announced that Tyler had decided to take the year to build the business. And everyone applauded, and my mother cried a little. And then she got up to get the pie, and the subject never came back around. My letter stayed folded in my back pocket through dessert and into the car and all the way to Marbury the next morning, where Lorraine read it standing up at the kitchen counter, put it down, and said, "Well, somebody in this family's going to be useful." That night, looking for a stapler in the sideboard at my parents' house, I found the ledger. Spiral notebook, blue cover, my mother's grocery list handwriting, 2 columns. One page had Tyler's name at the top and 41 entries under it, and I read enough of it to feel the floor tilt. Tuition, second tuition, truck, trailer, insurance, loan not really, Bowdoin deposit forfeited. Then I turned the page, and there was my name, and under it there were 4 entries, and every single one of them was a bus ticket to Marbury. $9, $11, $9. That was my column. That was the entire accounting of me. I took a photo of both pages with a Motorola flip phone, and I have carried that image through 4 phones and 3 laptops for 14 years. I never told anyone I had it. Not even Lorraine. March 2018. My father called me for the first time in 7 months, and I knew before I answered that it wasn't to ask how I was. Tyler's landscaping company had gone sideways. He'd bought 3 commercial mowers and a skid steer on a line of credit and lost his 2 biggest municipal contracts in the same quarter. The bank wanted a cosigner with clean credit. I had clean credit. I had spent 6 years building it out of nothing, in a 1-bedroom in Somerville, on a conservator's salary, eating like a graduate student well past the age where that's charming. $62,000, my father said. It's a formality, Delaney, it's family. I said no. I want you to understand how calmly I said it because that's what turned it. If I had cried, they'd have forgiven me. But I said, "No, I don't think that's a good idea," in a level voice, and my mother got on the line, and the temperature dropped 40 degrees. "You have no idea what it costs to raise children," she said. "I have some idea," I said. "About $9 a bus ticket." Dead silence. She didn't know what I meant. She just knew I'd hit something. That was the last real conversation I had with my parents for 3 years. I was not invited to Thanksgiving 2018, or Christmas, or my father's retirement party in 2019, where, I later learned, Tyler gave a speech about family loyalty. Somebody else co-signed that loan. Remember that, because it matters in about 4,000 words. If you're still with me, drop your country and your local time in the comments. And tell me honestly, at that phone call, would you have said yes just to keep the peace? October 2021. Lorraine called me on a Tuesday and asked me to come up on Saturday. She never asked me to come. She left the door unlocked and assumed. She'd made coffee she didn't drink. She sat down across from me at the same table I'd sanded wrong in 2003, and she said, "Pancreatic. Stage 3. They want to try things. I'm going to let them try 2 of them and then I'm going to stop." She was 63. I asked what she needed. She said, "Nothing yet. When I need something, it'll be big, and you'll say yes without thinking, and I need you to promise me you'll think first." I told the family that night. Group text, because that's what we had. My father replied 11 hours later, "Keep us posted." My mother replied the next day, and this is the message, word for word, that I have screenshotted and printed and handed to a lawyer. Sad news. Practical question though, has she made arrangements for the property? Someone should be talking to her while she's still lucid. Lorraine was in her own kitchen making her own dinner. She had another 1.5 years of driving herself to appointments in front of her. January 2022. My mother drove to Marbury. I know the date, January 19th, because Ruthie Vance, the neighbor with the casserole, wrote it down. Ruthie is 78 and keeps a weather log, and in the margins of her weather log she keeps track of everything else, and God bless her for it. Priscilla arrived with a folder. Inside was a durable power of attorney and a quitclaim deed, both already filled out, both naming her, printed off the internet in a font that didn't match. Lorraine was 3 weeks into her first round of treatment. She'd lost 11 pounds and most of her hair, and she was, by every account including the oncology notes I eventually read, entirely competent. "You need someone managing things," my mother told her. "You're not going to be able to handle this alone, and Gordon's your brother. Family should be handling this, not strangers." Lorraine said, "Delaney handles it." And my mother laughed and said the line that Ruthie wrote down in the margin next to a note about freezing rain. "Delaney is a girl we sent you so we could have a vacation. She is not a plan." Lorraine walked her to the door, did not raise her voice. Then she sat down and called Simon Acaffer's office in Rockland and left a voicemail that his paralegal later described to me as the shortest instruction I've ever transcribed. I didn't know any of that in January 2022. I found out in a lawyer's conference room 2.5 years later. April 2023, Tyler showed up at Gull Point with a flatbed. Lorraine was in Portland for a 4-day inpatient stay. He knew that, because I'd told my father, because I was still, at 35, stupid enough to believe that keeping them informed was the same as being part of a family. He cleaned out the barn. Not the house, the barn, which to Tyler was a shed full of old junk, and which was, in actual fact, my aunt's working shop. A 1954 Oliver patternmaker's vise, a set of Japanese chisels she'd bought one at a time over 30 years, 4 boxes of veneer, a Stanley 55 in its original case, and a walnut secretary desk she had been restoring for a client in Blue Hill on a signed contract for $6,000. He sold all of it to a picker out of Bangor for $3,200, cash, and he told my mother he'd cleared the hazard out of the property to help with the sale. I got the call from Ruthie, who had watched the flatbed from her kitchen window and written down the plate. Here's the part I still think about. The client's desk was not Lorraine's to sell, which made that transaction a conversion of a bylaid chattel, which is a very old and very unforgiving area of law. The picker in Bangor kept records. Tyler paid no taxes on the cash and reported none of it. And Tyler, being Tyler, took a photo of the emptied barn and sent it to my parents with a thumbs-up emoji, and my mother sent back a heart. I did not confront him. I did not call him. I drove to Bangor on a Thursday, found the picker, a decent man named Elias Moody who went pale when I explained whose tools those were, and I bought back the Oliver vise and the chisel roll for $1,100 of my own money. Then I asked Elias for a written inventory of everything he'd purchased, with the date, and the amount he'd paid, and the name of the man who sold it to him. He wrote it out on the back of a shop invoice, he signed it, he dated it. I put it in a folder, and I did not mention it to a living soul for 18 months. Then came the part that broke the last thing in me. Lorraine died on a Sunday morning in June 2024, in her own bed, with Ruthie on one side and me on the other, and a hospice nurse named Colette in the doorway. She'd stopped treatment in March, exactly as she said she would, after letting them try 2 things. Her last full sentence to me was about a chair. She wanted the Windsor in the front room to go to Ruthie because Ruthie's hip was bad, and it was the only chair in Maine she could get out of unassisted. My parents came to the funeral. They sat in the second row. My mother wore navy and accepted condolences from people who had never met her, and at the reception in the church basement, she told a woman from the Historical Society, in a voice I could hear from 6 feet away, that we all did what we could for Lorraine, but she made herself very difficult to help. The obituary ran in the county paper on a Wednesday. My father wrote it. It listed Lorraine as survived by her brother Gordon and his wife Priscilla, and their son Tyler and his wife Brooke, and their 2 children. My name was not in it. 26 summers, not in it. And 9 days after the funeral, my parents drove to Lake George for a week, because they had a cabin booked with a dock, and my mother posted a photograph of the water with a caption about needing time to heal as a family. Same lake, same dock. 25 years later, and I was still the one left at Lorraine's. Except this time, I was the one holding the keys. Because 2 weeks after that, an envelope arrived at my apartment in Somerville from an office on Union Street in Rockland, and inside it was a single sheet of paper with a date on it, March 14th, 2019, and a list of names of people who had been in the room that day. And not one of those names was Fitch. Now we're back in that living room, and I want you to see it with everything you know now. Who told you this house was yours to sell? My mother set the folder on the coffee table with a small, deliberate motion, the way you put down something you're about to pick back up. Delaney, don't do this in front of people. It's not a hard question, Priscilla. She hated her name in my mouth. 26 summers of Mom, and I'd stopped in June, and she'd noticed every single time. Gordon is Lorraine's brother, she said. Next of kin, that's not a mystery, that's a fact. Next of kin doesn't mean anything if there's a will. There isn't one, she said it fast, too fast, and I watched her hear herself do it. She never made one. She was a stubborn woman who didn't plan for anything in her life, and now the rest of us have to clean it up. Tyler laughed through his nose. You want a keepsake, take a lamp. The realtor in the quarter-zip cleared his throat. I'm sorry, I want to be careful here. Am I dealing with an estate that's in probate, or? You're dealing with me, my mother said. Ma'am, I just need the personal representative's letters of authority before I can list. I'll get you whatever you need. That was when Ruthie Vance stood up. 78 years old, bad hip, and she got herself out of the Windsor chair in the corner, which was her chair, which she had not known yet was her chair, and she said, Priscilla, I was here on January 19th. The room turned. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, my mother said. It means I was on the porch dropping off a pie, and I heard what you said to that woman in her own kitchen while she was sick. Ruthie's voice had a wobble in it, and she kept going anyway. I wrote it down. I write everything down. And I'll tell you something else. I saw a flatbed truck in that driveway last April with a plate I can read off a piece of paper in my kitchen drawer. Tyler's face did something interesting. Ruthie, my father said, this is a family matter. So was that. My mother recovered the way she always recovers, by getting quieter and kinder. Everyone's emotional, grief does this. She turned back to me with her hands folded. Delaney, sweetheart, I'm going to say this gently because I think you've built something up in your head. You spent summers here. That's lovely. That's a lovely thing to have. But a childhood is not a claim. You don't get equity for being somewhere. No, I said, you don't. So sign the acknowledgement, let the professionals work, and I promise you, when this closes, you'll be taken care of. How much? She blinked. What? You said I'd be taken care of. Give me the number. Nobody in that room had ever heard me ask for a number before. My mother's mouth opened and closed. 10,000, she said. Out of the proceeds, that's more than fair for cleaning out a house. The realtor's estimate was in the folder, and I could read the top line upside down from where I stood, because I'd been reading things upside down on that woman's kitchen table since I was 8 years old. $895,000. 210 feet of undeveloped Maine waterfront in 2024, and my mother had priced my 26 summers at $10,000. I did something then that I think unsettled her more than shouting would have. I laughed. One short breath of it, genuine, surprised out of me. Then I picked up the listing agreement, squared its edges, and set it back down in front of the realtor instead of signing it. Sir, I'd hold off. I don't think you want your name on this. Delaney, my mother's voice finally cracked out of its church register. Do not embarrass this family. I went up the stairs. Nobody followed me at first, and then everybody did, my mother's shoes on the treads behind me, Tyler after her, my father last and slowest. I walked down the hall to the closet and reached up to the top shelf and took down the green metal box, dented on one corner, $30 at a hardware store, and I turned around with it under my arm. My mother stopped so hard that Tyler ran into her. "What is that?" "You've been in this house 6 weeks, Priscilla," I said. "You went through her jewelry, you went through her desk, you never once looked up." "Give me that box." "No." I came down the stairs with it. 11 people watched me cross my aunt's living room and walk out her front door with a metal box under my arm and Ruthie Vance holding the screen open for me, and I put it on the passenger seat of my car, and I drove 71 minutes north to Rockland with my hands perfectly steady on the wheel. Because the envelope from Simon Aucaffer had arrived 9 days earlier, and I had already read it, and I already knew what was in that box. I hadn't gone up those stairs to find out. I'd gone up those stairs so that 11 people would watch me carry it out. Wherever you're listening from right now, morning coffee in the States, late evening in the UK, the middle of the night somewhere I've never been, drop your country and your local time in the comments. Because everything up to this point was them doing things to me. What comes next is the part I did on purpose. Simon Aucaffer's office was on the second floor above a bakery, and the whole conference room smelled like bread, which felt like a joke God was making. He was maybe 60, soft-spoken, and he had a banker's box on the table before I sat down. "I should say first," he said, "that your aunt gave me instructions about this meeting 5 years ago. She told me you'd come in angry, and I should let you sit for a minute before I said anything." I sat for a minute. Then he opened the box. On March 14, 2019, Lorraine Fitch executed 3 documents in this room: a last will and testament, a revocable living trust, and a deed transferring the Gull Point Road property into that trust. "Into the trust," I repeated. "Into the trust." He let that land because he could see I understood, and he let me be the one to say it. Then it never went to probate. It never went anywhere. It has not been part of anyone's estate for 5 years. It is trust property, and it has been continuously since 2019. He turned a page. "You are the sole successor trustee. You are also the sole beneficiary. Your aunt was very specific about not splitting those roles because she said, and I wrote this down, they'll try to negotiate with whoever's weaker, so don't give them 2 doors." I put my hand flat on the table. "My mother has a realtor," I said. "Your mother has a problem." He said it without any heat at all. "She has no authority, no letters, no standing, and she's been telling a licensed broker otherwise. That's not a family dispute. That's a disclosure issue for him and a much bigger one for her." The witnesses on the 2019 documents were Ruthie Vance and a man named Harold Pell, who'd been buying restored chairs from my aunt since 1988. The notary was a woman from the bakery downstairs. Not one Fitch in the room. She'd built it that way on purpose, 5 years out, while everyone was still assuming she'd die confused and unprepared. Then Aucaffer said, "There's a second matter, it's substantial." He slid a recorded mortgage across the table. In August 2018, after I said no, Lorraine had co-signed Tyler's line of credit, $62,000, and when he defaulted the following year, she paid it, and she did not do it as a gift. She had Aucaffer draw up a promissory note secured by a second mortgage on Tyler's house in Brunswick, and she recorded it at the Registry of Deeds, and she never mentioned it to a soul. Principal, accrued interest, and the additional advances she'd made in 2020 and 2021 to keep his equipment from being repossessed. $148,600. Owed to the trust, owed as of 6 weeks ago to me. "Does he know?" I asked. "He signed it. Whether he remembers signing it is a different question." Aucaffer almost smiled. People rarely read the second page when a relative is handing them money. Then he told me the thing that made my ears ring. Tyler had a refinance in process. His business debt had ballooned to $412,000, and he was rolling it into his home. The new lender required the existing second position to be paid off or subordinated at closing. which required a signature from the holder of that second mortgage, which required a signature from the trustee, which required a signature from me. When's his closing? I asked. Aquifer checked, 9 days. I want to tell you that I felt triumphant. What I actually felt was very cold and very calm and slightly nauseous, the way you feel when a doctor tells you the results are back and they're not what anyone expected. That night, I opened the green box on my kitchen table in Somerville with a glass of wine I didn't touch. 26 years of my aunt's silence, and it turned out she hadn't been silent at all. She'd been writing it down. Receipts every summer in date order. The grocery bag of clothes in 1999 because she'd bought me a duffel that July and kept the tag. School supplies she'd purchased in August's my mother forgot. A doctor's bill from 2004 when I got strep at her house and nobody drove up. A note in her handwriting from July 2006 that just said, "Called G twice." No answer. D asked again about the lake. A photocopy of the $11,000 she wired me in 2013 with a sticky note on it. Not alone. Don't let them tell her it was. A one-page letter from my mother dated 2016 that I had never seen, asking Lorraine whether she'd given any thought to keeping the property in the family for Tyler's children, signed warmly, Priscilla. Tyler's children were, at that point, not yet born. The unsigned quitclaim deed and power of attorney from January 2022, still in their folder, with Lorraine's own note paperclip to the front, brought by P1-1922. Refused. Witness, R. Vance next door heard. And at the bottom of the box, a sealed envelope with my name on it in her handwriting, and underneath my name, 4 more words. Open it in the room. I did not open it. I put it in my bag and it stayed in my bag for 11 days. Then I built my file. I am a conservator by trade. My entire professional life is documentation, condition reports, provenance chains, before and after. You learn that the object doesn't matter as much as the paper trail that proves what the object is. My family had spent 26 years underestimating a person whose actual job is proving what things are worth. Into the file went the photograph from 2011. My mother's blue spiral ledger, both pages, Tyler's 41 entries totaling $238,000, and my 4 entries. $9, $9, $11, $9. 14 years I'd carried that image and never known what it was for. Turns out it wasn't evidence of anything legal. It was evidence of intent. And intent is the whole ballgame when you're explaining to a court why a family that spent $250,000 on one child and $38 on the other might be motivated to misrepresent an estate. Into the file went Elias Moody's handwritten inventory from Bangor. Signed, dated, listing every item Tyler sold on April 11, 2023, for $3,200 in cash, including a walnut secretary desk belonging to a client in Blue Hill who had a signed $6,000 restoration contract and had spent 18 months being told there'd been a delay. Into the file went Rusi's weather log, photocopied at the library in Marbury, freezing rain and all. Into the file went my mother's text message about arrangements and lucidity, and the obituary my father wrote, and a screenshot of a photograph of a lake with a caption about healing as a family, posted 9 days after we buried his sister. And then I stopped collecting, and I started sending. Day 1, Aquifer's office sent a certification of trust and a cease and desist to the realtor in the quarter-zip. He responded in 4 hours, apologized twice, and withdrew. He also, and I did not ask him to do this, forwarded me the entire email chain in which my mother had represented herself as the personal representative of an estate that did not exist. 11 emails. She had put it in writing 11 separate times. Day 2, I recorded the certification of trust at the county registry. Public, searchable, anyone who pulled that parcel would now see it. Day 3, a locksmith met me at Gull Point Road at 9 in the morning. I changed every lock in the house and the barn, and I did it myself alongside him because that's how Lorraine would have done it. I had the property insured under the trust, $740 for the binder. I photographed every room. I found 4 of the Japanese chisels still in a drawer that Tyler had missed, and I sat down on the floor of that barn and cried for about 90 seconds, and then got up and kept working. Day 4. Ackeffer's office sent formal notice to Gordon and Priscilla Fitch that the property was trust-held, that they were to remove personal effects within 14 days, and that any further interference would be treated as tortious. My mother called me 9 times that afternoon. I did not answer any of them, and I want to be honest with you about why. It wasn't strategy. I wasn't ready to hear her voice yet without giving something away. Day 5. Ackeffer sent Tyler a demand letter on the promissory note, with a payoff figure, a copy of the recorded mortgage, and a separate paragraph regarding the conversion of trust property from the barn on April 11, 2023, with Elias Moody's inventory attached as Exhibit B. Day 6 was when Brooke texted me. My sister-in-law and I had exchanged maybe 200 words in 8 years. Her message was 1 line and a video file. I don't know if this helps you, but I recorded the whole thing in Lorraine's living room. I'm not sending it to anyone else. I'm sorry, Delaney. 11 minutes of footage. My mother's church voice crystal clear. You were the one we could leave behind. You were stored here. Don't stand in my sister's living room acting like a beneficiary. The realtor's disclaimer. Ruthie standing up. All of it timestamped. I watched it twice, and then I called her. And Brooke picked up on the first ring and started talking before I said anything. She told me Tyler had gotten the demand letter that morning and had thrown a chair. She told me she'd found out about the refinance from the lender, not from her husband. She told me that in April of last year he'd come home with cash in an envelope and told her he'd sold some junk. Then she said, "There's something else. In the car, driving up that day, your mom told him what to say to you. She scripted it. She said, and I'm quoting, offer her 10. She'll take 10, she's never had anything." Day 7. Tyler's lender pulled title on the Brunswick property and found the second mortgage sitting there exactly where it had been recorded in 2019, and the refinance went from routine to conditional overnight. His loan officer called Ackeffer. Ackeffer called me and asked how I wanted to respond. I told him the truth, I hadn't decided. Day 8, my father called, not my mother. My father, who had not initiated a phone call with me since March of 2018. He didn't apologize. He said, "Your brother's going to lose his house." "He might." A long pause, and then, in a smaller voice than I'd ever heard out of him, Lorraine really made a trust. In 2019, Gordon, 5 years ago, while you were telling everyone she couldn't plan her way out of a paper bag. He was quiet for a while. Then, "Your mother says you've been vindictive about this." My mother has said 11 things, in writing to a licensed broker, that she's going to have to explain. I hung up first. It's a small thing, I'd never done it before. Day 9 was the closing. I did not sign. Not a payoff, not a subordination, nothing. I simply did not respond, which is not an act of aggression, it's the absence of an act, and it is the single most powerful thing a person with a recorded lien can do. Tyler's closing collapsed at 11:40 in the morning. The $412,000 stayed exactly where it was, at commercial rates, on equipment that was 6 years old and worth a third of what he owed on it. And at 2:15 that afternoon, my mother sent me a text message that I have kept, because it is the single most honest thing that woman has ever written to me. "What do you want?" No question mark. She'd finally understood she was negotiating. I typed back 4 words and put my phone face down on the workbench. Sunday, Lorraine's, 2 o'clock. Same house, same room, same day of the week. And this time I was the one deciding who got invited. They arrived at 2:04, which for my mother was a statement. I'd unlocked the front door at 1 and left it open. The living room was different by then. The realtor's coffee table was gone, sold, along with most of what my mother had already priced. What was left was the green chair, the Windsor in the corner, and a folding table from the barn with 8 chairs around it that I'd carried in myself. Ruthie Vance was already seated. So was Simon Ackeffer with his banker's box. Harold Pell, the man who'd been buying chairs from Lorraine since 1988 and had witnessed her signature in 2019, sat with his hat on his knee. Colette, the hospice nurse, had driven 40 minutes on her day off. Elias Moody had come down from Bangor in a work truck. And Brooke was there, alone, having told her husband she'd meet him. My parents stopped in the doorway. "Who are all these people?" my mother said. "Witnesses," I said. "You always liked an audience, I thought I'd give you one." Tyler came in behind them and did not sit. He stood by the window in our father's spot, jaw working, and he said, "You've made your point. Sign the subordination." "Sit down, Tyler. I've got a lender on the phone at 4. You've got a lender who already declined you. Sit down." He sat. I stayed standing, and I put a single manila folder on the table, and I did not open it. "6 weeks ago," I said, "in this room, Priscilla told 11 people that I was stored here. That my parents sent me to my aunt's every summer so they could take my brother on vacation, and that it was a kindness, and that a childhood is not a claim." "I was upset," my mother said. "People say things when they're grieving." "You weren't grieving, you had a listing agreement." "Delaney." "You were right about one thing though." I let it sit. "A childhood isn't a claim, you don't get equity for being somewhere. That's exactly correct, and it's the reason none of this is about my summers." Ackeffer slid the first document across. The certification of trust, recorded, stamped. "This property left the estate on March 14, 2019, he said. "It has not been an inheritance question for 5 years. There is nothing for anyone here to contest because there is nothing in dispute. The trust owns it. Ms. Fitch is the trustee." My mother didn't touch the paper. She manipulated a dying woman. "Lorraine wasn't dying in 2019, Ruthie said. She was up a ladder cleaning her gutters in 2019. I watched her do it." "She was witness to the execution," Ackeffer said. "As was Mr. Pell. Neither is related to this family. Your sister-in-law chose them for that reason." "That's a lie," my mother said. "Lorraine and I were close." And there it was, the door held open for me. "January 19, 2022, I said. "You drove up here with a quitclaim deed you printed off the internet. She was 3 weeks into chemo. You told her she needed family handling things, not strangers. She told you I handle it." My mother's face did not move. "And you said, Delaney is a girl we sent you so we could have a vacation. She is not a plan." Ruthie opened her weather log to the page. Freezing rain, and in the margin, in a 78-year-old woman's careful hand, the whole sentence. My father turned his head and looked at his wife for what I think was the first time in about 40 years. "That's out of context," my mother said. "It's the whole context. It's the only thing you've ever actually meant." I opened the folder then, and I worked through it the way I write a condition report. One item at a time, no adjectives. The 11 emails to the realtor, in which she represented herself as personal representative of an estate that did not exist. He forwarded these to me himself, Priscilla. He was frightened. "You put a licensed broker's career in the middle of this." The 2016 letter, warmly, Priscilla, asking Lorraine to keep the property in the family for grandchildren who hadn't been born. The text about arrangements and lucidity, sent while its subject was standing in this kitchen cooking her own dinner. Then Elias Moody's inventory, and I turned it toward my brother. April 11, 2023, you waited until she was inpatient in Portland. I cleaned out a shed. You sold a client's desk. I set down the Blue Hill contract beside it. $6,000, signed, deposit paid. That desk wasn't Lorraine's. It wasn't yours. You took $3,200 in cash for $40,000 of tools and somebody else's furniture, and you didn't report a dollar of it. That's different, Tyler said. Why? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Everyone in that room watched him try to find the difference and fail to locate it. And this, I said, is the note you signed. The promissory note, the recorded second mortgage, $148,600. Tyler stared at his own signature. She said it was help. It was help. She paid your line of credit in 2019 after I refused to co-sign it. $62,000. I looked at my father. You called me a formality, Gordon. You told me it was family. Then when I said no, you went to the woman you called the shack dweller, and she said yes. And she said yes on paper, because she had learned what happens in this family to people who help you without documentation. My mother finally reached for something. So this is about money. No, this is the part where I show you it was never about money for her, either. I took the sealed envelope out of my bag. Open it in the room. Colette, the hospice nurse, had told me the week before that Lorraine dictated one letter in her last month and made her leave the room while she signed it. I broke the seal and read it aloud, and my voice held for most of it. Gordon, Priscilla. You gave me your daughter every June because she was inconvenient to you, and you took her back every August like a coat out of storage. You never once asked what she did here. In 26 years, neither of you asked me a single question about her. She can date a piece of walnut by the saw marks. She can mix hide glue by feel. She's the only person in this family who ever finished anything. You'll say I turned her against you. I want it on the record that I never had to. You did all of that yourselves in front of me every summer, and I wrote it down. The house is hers. It was always going to be hers. I decided in 2003, and I made it legal in 2019, and I told nobody, because I knew exactly what you'd do if you had time. You sent her to me. That was the only good thing you ever did for either of us, and you did it by accident, trying to get rid of her. Thank you for the summers. Lorraine. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Then my mother said quietly, she had no right. And my father, still looking at the table, said, she had every right, Priscilla, it was her house. That was the first time in my life I heard him contradict her. I put the letter back in the envelope. Here's where we are, I said. The trust holds a recorded lien on your house, Tyler. I'm not calling it. I'm also not subordinating it, not this year, not next. It sits there. Every lender you ever approach will see it, and they'll ask what it is, and you'll have to tell them. You're ruining me. I'm doing to you exactly what you all did to me. Nothing. I'm leaving you where you are and going on with my life. I picked up the folder. You did it to me every June for 26 years and called it a kindness. You'll survive a lien. My mother stood up. She was shaking, and it wasn't grief. After everything we did for you. I thought about the blue spiral notebook and the 4 entries, and I gave her the number, because she taught me that numbers are the only thing this family respects. $38, I said. 4 bus tickets, that's everything you did for me. She kept receipts too, Priscilla. Hers filled a box. They cleared out their things 11 days later. I wasn't there. Ruthie was, and she reported that it took 40 minutes and that my mother did not look at the house when she pulled out of the driveway. I never sold Gull Point Road. The realtor's number was $895,000, and people still call about that stretch of water, and I have a folder of letters from developers that I used to shim a wobbly cabinet in the barn. Selling it would have been the sensible thing. It also would have meant that every summer of my childhood had a price on it, and my mother had already tried that math once. Instead, I moved up in October. The barn is a working shop again. I took the Oliver vise off the bench where I'd stored it and mounted it back in its original bolt holes, which were still there, because Lorraine drilled them in 1971 and never moved that vise once. Fitch Conservation does structural furniture restoration for 2 museums, a historical society, and about 30 private clients up and down the coast. Last year I billed $206,000 out of a building my brother emptied for $3,200 in cash. The Blue Hills secretary desk came back. Elias Moody found it for me at an auction outside Portsmouth and called, and I bought it for $4,100 of my own money and finished the restoration Lorraine started. The client, a retired schoolteacher named Marguerite, cried when it came off the truck. I refused her payment. She sends me clients instead, which was the better deal, and she knows it. Ruthie has the Windsor chair. It's in her front room, angled toward the window so she can see the road, and she still keeps her weather log. I have dinner with her most Thursdays. She's 80 now and tells me the same 3 stories about her late husband, and I let her, because I know exactly what it's worth to be listened to by someone who isn't obligated. Harold Pell buys a chair from me every spring, same as he did from my aunt. He's 91 and I suspect he has nowhere left to put them. My father calls about once a month. I'm not going to tell you we've healed because we haven't, but he asks questions now. He asked me last March how you tell walnut from stained birch, and I told him about the weight, and he was quiet, and then he said, "She taught you that." Not a question. He came up in June for one afternoon and stood in the barn doorway and didn't come in, and before he left he said the only apology he's managed, which was, "We had a system and you were the part of it that cost us nothing." That's not an apology in most families. In mine, it's a confession, and I took it. My mother has not spoken to me in 19 months. What she has done is tell people her daughter took her sister-in-law's house through a lawyer, and the trouble with that story in a county this size is that Ruthie Vance also lives here, and Harold Pell has been buying furniture here since 1988, and there's a bakery in Rockland where the notary works. Priscilla stopped going to the Historical Society luncheons in the spring of last year. Nobody asked her to stop, she just stopped. Tyler filed Chapter 7 14 months ago. I want to be precise about my role in that because I've thought about it a great deal. I didn't call the lien. I never sued him for the barn. What I did was decline to sign one piece of paper, and everything after that was $412,000 of his own decisions arriving on schedule. The lien is still recorded. It will be there for a long time. Brooke left him in the spring. She and the kids are in Portland now. She texts me photographs of things she finds at estate sales and asks if they're worth anything, and about half the time they are. My niece is 11 and came up for a week in July, entirely her own idea, and I put her to work sanding a tabletop for 11 hours and then made her do it again because she'd gone across the grain. On the 4th day, she asked me why I was so patient with her. I told her that somebody was patient with me once, in this exact room, and that I'd been trying to pay it forward for about 25 years. She's coming back next June. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end of this one. One last time, tell me in the comments where you're listening from, your country and the time right now, and if this story got to you, subscribe so the next one finds you. Here's what I keep coming back to. My parents thought they were getting rid of me. Every June they packed a bag and drove 2 hours and 40 minutes north and handed me off, and every August they collected me, and in their accounting it was efficient. $9 a ticket. They believed the vacation was the valuable thing, and the child left behind was the cost of it. They were half right. Something was being invested those summers. It just wasn't in Tyler. Because when you send a child away, you don't get to control who she becomes while she's gone. You don't get to choose who's standing at the sink when she asks the hardest question of her life. My mother spent 26 years handing me to the one person in the world who was paying attention, and then acted shocked that I turned out to be Lorraine's. The last thing my aunt ever said to me about the family, months before the end, was in that kitchen with her back to me. She said, "They think nobody's writing it down." Somebody was, and when it mattered, everything they'd ever done to me was already on paper, in a green metal box, on the top shelf of a closet none of them ever bothered to look in. The house is warm this time of year. The gutters are clean. There's a table in the barn I've been sanding since Tuesday. And every June, when the light comes back over the water, I still think of it as the beginning of the good part of the year. They gave me that, by accident, trying to get rid of me,